I'm Chris, and today we're going to make a coffin. Let's do this real quick. Today we're going to make a mini coffin. It's pretty much the same build as a large size coffin, only a little smaller. So follow along. We're going to start by drawing a few plans. Now this is necessary to get the angles and everything you need to make this coffin. It makes things a lot easier. We want to make a bunch of boards, and I'm just going to cut these boards down to maybe about 3/4 of an inch wide or so, and they're going to be about 1/4 inch thick. Now it's definitely dangerous doing it this way. I wouldn't really recommend it. There's a lot of potential for kickback here, but it's one of the only ways I could really think of doing it. If you use this method, please be careful and safe. Alternatively, you could use a bandsaw. I found that my little bandsaw, though, really wasn't that accurate. The blade kept wandering no matter what I did. Maybe it's my inexperience with it, I don't know. There is an extremely high risk of kickback when trying to cut this little 3/4 piece of wood down to 1/4 of an inch thick. I definitely don't recommend doing it this way. But I found that I can make a little jig specific for this job that really gave me a lot more control and helped eliminate kickback for me. Now once you've cut all your pieces, it's really time to start piecing this together just like a jigsaw puzzle, just to give you an idea how everything goes together. Now for myself and my design, on the lid of the coffin, I wanted to have like a little border around it. This is how I originally designed my full-size coffin, and I really wanted to try to match it the best I can. I highly recommend using the 1:1 scale drawing. I found it very useful when I was trying to plan out the angles for the cuts I needed to make. And it's really as easy as just placing the piece of wood on top of your drawing and kind of making marks on either side of the piece of wood to where the drawing meets it, flipping it over, placing a ruler on top of it, lining it up, and drawing a line, and then go ahead and cutting it out. Go ahead and do this for all your boards. Now I recently picked up a bandsaw on Craigslist for about $50 or $60. It's a smaller bandsaw, but for work like this, it really made quick work of cutting these little pieces. For the sides of the coffin, the bottom of the coffin, and even the middle of the lid of the coffin, you can go ahead and glue 5 boards together, clamp them together, and make sure they're nice and flush with each other. This is going to save a little bit of time in the long run. Just be careful when you put boards and a clamp in the middle that there's not too much excess glue to where it's going to glue everything together. As you're waiting for the glue to dry, you can go ahead and take the middle of the lid of the coffin and start to place the borders around everything. I started with the top and the bottom of the border, gluing those in place, so it'll help me later on when I make the angles for the rest of the pieces. Now again, aside from taking the template and placing it on top of the boards, I found the easier way to figure out the rest of the angles, especially if your cuts are a little inaccurate, was to take the lid of the coffin, again, and place it on top of the boards and just kind of trace out the angles that you need. Go ahead and cut them on your saw. Take your time cutting the angles on the rest of the pieces. You want to be as precise as you can. It's a good idea to go ahead and dry fit everything together before you start gluing it. Again, don't use too much excess glue. You don't want a messy cleanup later. I did find it a little tricky trying to clamp these pieces together. After the glue is dried on all these pieces, it's a good idea to sand everything first. You want to get the best sand you can at the moment, because when you have the whole coffin assembled, it's going to be a little bit harder to sand the insides. When trying to make the bottom of the coffin, you have to realize that the bottom is going to be a little bit smaller than the top, because I'm going to have the bottom set inside the coffin. So all we have to really do is trace out the top of the coffin onto the wood that we're going to use for the bottom, and then subtract the width of the sides of the coffin. And all I did there was just put the board on top and make another trace line, and then cut everything out. For the side pieces, you really want to determine the angles you need to cut them at, and I found it a little easier to tilt the table on my bandsaw to achieve these angles. I found myself sanding again, because I really want to make sure that this coffin has a nice smooth finish. Now, when gluing the sides together, I found it a little bit easier to make up a jig, and I did this for a couple reasons, just because I don't have enough hands to hold everything together, and I don't really have the clamps to clamp this kind of stuff together. So making a little jig just to help support the pieces really helps me out. Now I'm not gluing the bottom of the coffin in quite yet. I'm just getting a little bit of glue on the sides, and then I'm going to glue the bottom of the coffin in a little bit later. I don't want it to stick to the cardboard or anything like that. I don't want to have extra cleanup. You can go ahead and make the lid kind of hinge open. We can have it slide off, or what I rather do is mimic the real coffin that I made. And in doing that, on the bottom of the lid I had some boards going perpendicular to them, kind of holding everything together. And I can do it in such a way that I make the boards just a little bit smaller so that they set inside the coffin, really holding everything tight and together. And the easiest way for me to do that is place the lid top side down, putting little boards across it, and then putting the coffin on top of it, and kind of just tracing out the angles that I need, cutting them up on the bandsaw, and then gluing everything together. To help get a nice glue joint, I want to put something on top so that I can add a nice heavy weight to it, so that the glue really adheres to everything the way it should. It's time now to glue the bottom in place. And I chose to do this on my table saw just because I really don't want that glue to stick to anything else. I don't want it to stick to my wooden workbench, I don't want it to stick to the cardboard, and I figured it's not really going to stick to the table saw and it's a nice easy cleanup anyways. I also decided to add just a couple extra supports to really help the walls stay in place. And this was just as easy as marking the piece of wood flush with the top and then subtracting the width of the wood that would protrude down into the coffin. I would suggest here to take your time when gluing, just so you don't have excess glue, because if you really have overspilled that glue inside of there, it's going to be a little bit harder to clean up, and sometimes the stains don't always take to the glue, so you get kind of white spots in there. So definitely take a little extra time and make sure you clamp everything together because you want it to hold nice and tight. It's time now for the final sanding. I know, another sanding, but for this sanding you're really going to take off the excess glue and then you want to wipe the whole thing down with a damp cloth just so that you get all the excess dust off. And then it's time to apply whatever finish you'd like. In my case I'm using a stain that's pretty similar to the stain I used for the full-size coffin. And all I want to do really is get the stain down in there in all the nooks and crannies, and then go ahead and take another cloth and kind of wipe all the excess stain off. And if you really want, you can put a couple coats of stain on, make it as light or as dark as you want, and before long your coffin's going to be nice and ready for Halloween. Whether you present it on your mantelpiece, on your piano, on your table, on your kitchen table, dining room table as a centerpiece, whatever you choose to do with it. And as I promised, here's the plans that I drew up. It'll give you an idea of how you can really build this thing if you choose. I thank you guys for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you found this video helpful in making your coffin, please leave a comment below. Thank you guys so much.